Hello, this is Mrs. Ward, and I am going to go over the 4.2 review worksheet. So the first thing it says do is fill out the unit circle. Remember, this is going to be part of your quiz this time. You're going to have to fill out the unit circle, and you are going to have to include everything on that unit circle. You're going to have the degrees, the radian measures of each angle, and then you're going to have the ordered pair. So you're going to have all four of those things or all three of those things for each angle. So make sure you have that memorized. And then once you fill this out for the quiz, you can use it for the remainder of the quiz. So you want to get that right, because if you don't, then that may cause you problems later on in the quiz. So that was number one, was filling in the unit circle. This next one is without a calculator, which means we want like the square of 2 over 2. We do not want a decimal. You are to fill out the 6 trig functions, and the angle that they're giving me is 7 pi over 4. So I'm looking at 7 pi over 4. I know that that is in the fourth quadrant. I know that the ordered pair for 7 pi over 4 is going to be a positive square root of 2 over 2, and then a negative square root of 2 over 2. And I like to write that down so I have it handy. So when I go to find the sign, remember the sign is the y value, so this is going to be a negative square root of 2 over 2. The reciprocal of that will be the cosecant, so the cosecant will still be negative, and it's going to be 2 over the square root of 2. Rationalizing my denominator, I'm going to multiply by the square root of 2 over 2. And when I do that, I get 2 times the square root of 2, this is still negative, over 2. The 2's will simplify, and my final answer is a negative square root of 2. To find the cosine, I'm looking at the x value, which is a positive square root of 2 over 2. The reciprocal of cosine is secant, so that would be a positive 2 over the square root of 2, which is going to be the exact same work that I just did up here. So it's going to be a positive square root of 2. To find the tangent, I take my y, or my sine, which is the square root of 2 over 2, and put it over my x, or my cosine, which is a positive square root of 2 over 2. If you didn't realize that you were dividing the same thing by the same thing, you would multiply by the reciprocal. And when I do that, the 2's will simplify, the square roots will simplify, and I'm left with a negative 1. So my tangent is a negative 1. The cotangent is a reciprocal of that, so technically I'm taking 1 over a negative 1, which will just be negative 1. So those are the 6 trig values for 7 pi over 4. The next one, I want you to evaluate, if possible, the trig functions. Make sure that you're noticing that every single question is a different value. It's a different angle, so you're going to have to do different answers for each one. So the sine of negative 4 pi over 3, remember, I'm not a fan of the negative 4 pi over 3, so I would probably add 2 pi, and just doing that on my calculator, and I would get 2 pi over 3. That means the negative 4 pi over 3 and 2 pi over 3 are coterminal angles. That means they have the exact same ordered pair. The ordered pair for 2 pi over 3 is going to be a negative 1/2 square root 3 over 2. This question is just asking for the sign, so that's going to be a positive square root 3 over 2. The next one, part B, 11 pi over 6. The ordered pair for 11 pi over 6 is going to be the square root of 3 over 2, negative 1/2. Because it is in the fourth quadrant, the x would be positive, the y would be negative. And it wants the cosine, so I'm just doing the x value, which would be the square root of 3 over 2. The next one is the tangent of negative pi over 6. You could take the negative pi over 6, add the 2 pi, and you're going to get 11 pi over 6. So you are in the fourth quadrant. The ordered pair that goes with the fourth quadrant is this ordered pair right here. There's the same angle, coterminal angles. The tangent, I'm going to take my y value, which is negative 1/2, divide it by my x value, which is the square root of 3 over 2. So I'm going to have negative 1/2 times the reciprocal. These will simplify, and I'm getting negative 1 over the square root of 3. Rationalizing the denominator, my final answer is going to be a negative square root of 3 over 3. Okay, part D, 5 pi over 2. Again, I need to figure out if it's the positive y-axis or the negative y-axis. So I am going, that's more than 2 pi, so I subtract 2 pi. And when I do that, that will be pi over 2. That ordered pair is, whoopsie, 0, 1. Shouldn't have put it there, so I'm going to move that. That ordered pair is 0, 1. Okay, good enough. And the cosecant is a reciprocal of sine. So the sine is 1. So the reciprocal of sine is 1 over 1, which will just be 1. Secant of negative pi over 4. If you know it's in the fourth quadrant, you can just leave it like that, or you could have added 2 pi. Either way, I get 7 pi over 4. I know that this angle is in the fourth quadrant, and the ordered pair, secant is the ordered pair for 7 pi over 4 is square root of 2 over 2, negative square root of 2 over 2. It wants the secant, so it wants the reciprocal of cosine. So it's going to be 1 over the positive square root of 2 over 2, which will end up being the reciprocal of that will be 2 over the square root of 2. Rationalizing my denominator, I end up with 2 times the square root of 2 over 2, and then the 2's will simplify. And my final answer is just the square root of 2. And if you remember that because you did that before, that's fine. You can just go to square root of 2. The last one is cotangent of 6 pi. If I subtract 2 pi, that gives me 4 pi. Subtract 2 pi, and that gives me 2 pi. So the ordered pair for 2 pi, or I could subtract 2 pi again, doesn't matter. The ordered pair for that is going to be 1, 0. Cotangent is the cosine, which is 1, over the sine, which is 0. So 1 divided by 0 is undefined. And those are my 6 values for those 6 different angles. Number 4 asked me to use my calculator. So this is just going to be a quick check on whether or not you know how to use your calculator. So I'm getting out my calculator. I'm going to a calculator page. And the first one I have is sine of 5.7. So I'm going to hit trig. Sine is already highlighted. I'm going to do 5.7. And when I do that, I get 0.9932. The next one is going to be the cotangent of 15 pi over 3. So I'm going to hit my trig button. I'm going to go the cotangent. And if you don't put your calculator and press the test, these will be grayed out. So you need to make sure that you do that Control A when we go into press the test. And I want 15 pi over 13. So I am going to use my favorite button, Control Divide. I'm going to do 15, get the pi symbol, and put this over 13. And when I do that and hit enter, I should get 15.78. The next one is the secant of 270 degrees in 45 minutes. So I'm going to hit trig. I want secant, so I'm going to go over the secant. I want 270. Going to hit the pi symbol to get my degree. And then 45 minutes. Hit the pi symbol again to get that tick that represents minutes. And then I am going to hit enter. And I get 76.396. And then the last one, the tangent. So tangent of negative 7.8. And I get negative 0.1369. So those are my answers. And I'm going to bring them over here. So give me a second to do that. So there I've brought all the answers over so you can see what I typed in my calculator to get those answers. The next one says find the following trig values of the angle shown below. So you're still going with the fact that the sine is when you do an ordered pair, it goes cosine sine. So your sine is going to be the y value. So in this case, the y value is negative 15/17. Your cosine is the x value, which in this case is going to be negative 8/17. And then the tangent is going to be your y, which is negative 15 over 17 over your x, which is negative 8 over 17. And you can also think of this as sine over cosine. So now this is a complex fraction. I have to simplify it. So I'm going to take negative 15 over 17, and I'm going to multiply it by the reciprocal, which is 17 over negative 8. These 17s will simplify, and negative times a negative will be a positive. So I'm going to end up with 15 over 8, and that is going to be my tangent. Number 6, it says, if the sine is negative 3/5, the cosine is positive, what quadrant is the angle in? So this is asking you to remember, when we did this, we talked about positive and negative. So we said in the first quadrant both were positive. In the second quadrant, the x value was negative, the y value was positive. Third quadrant, they were both negative. And in the fourth quadrant, the x was positive and the y was negative. So this, remember, cosine sine, cosine sine. So this is telling me that my sine is negative. So if my sine is negative, that means it's either going to be the third quadrant or the fourth quadrant, because those are the two quadrants where my y value is negative. Then it tells me that the cosine is positive. Well, the only place that the cosine is positive and the sine is negative is right here, which would be in the fourth quadrant. And that's the way you're going to do those. I would take the time to draw that little 4 quadrants and put the plus, plus, minus, plus, and figure it out that way. Number 7 says evaluate the following. This is based on even and odd functions. So remember, an even function, if you take the cosine, like we said, cosine of 30 degrees was the square root of 3 over 2. Then if you take the cosine of a negative 30 degrees, you're going to drop down into the fourth quadrant. Or your cosine, when I drop down into the fourth quadrant, it's still going to be positive. So that's going to be a square root of 3 over 2. So the cosine is what is called an even function, which means it doesn't matter if I take the cosine of 30 or negative 30. I'm going to get the exact same value with the same sign. So if the cosine is 2/3, then the cosine of opposite theta is still going to be a positive 2/3, because that is an even function. Okay, if I look at, let's do the same thing for sine. If I do sine of 30 degrees, the sine of 30 degrees is a positive 1/2. If I do the sine of a negative 30 degrees, now I'm dropping down into the fourth quadrant right here, and the sign is negative, so this will be a negative 1/2. It has the same absolute value, 1/2 and 1/2, but one is positive, one is negative. That's an example of an odd function. So sine is an odd function. So if the sine of theta is 1/5, then when I take the sine of the opposite of that angle, it's still going to be 1/5, except for I have to change the sign and make it a negative 1/5. And tangent is also another odd function. And Mrs. Kelm talked about that in the video. So if I have the tangent of the opposite of theta, and that's 3/4, then when I take the tangent of theta, since it's an odd function, the sign's going to have to change, and this is going to be a negative 3/4. And that's all you have to do for odd and even functions. The value is still going to be the same, 1/5 and 1/5, or 2/3 and 2/3, 3/4 and 3/4. The value is still going to be the same. It's just a matter of whether it's going to stay with the same sign, like positive to positive, or change signs, positive to negative, or in this case, negative to positive. And I believe that's it. If you have any questions, let us know, and we will see you next class.